want you to take a second and think of a few words to describe yourself. Now I want you to look back to 5 years ago. Would you describe yourself 5 years ago the same way you would describe yourself now? Now think 5 years into the future. In what ways do you think you might change? Will you have the same friends, the same beliefs, the same outlook on life? As we take our journey through life, we go through constant life changes and stages that are constantly shaping the person we are. Welcome back, AP Psych class, for a review session on Unit 6, Lifespan Development. In this unit, we are going to start off by talking a little bit about physical development. From there, we'll move on to factors that contribute to both social and emotional development. We'll then look at how our thought process develop over time by diving into Piaget's theory on cognitive development, and then we will end with Kohlberg and his theory on moral development. Before we get into all of these theories on how we develop, it's important to take a look at the different arguments psychologists have regarding our development. What is going to affect our development more? Is it going to be our genetics, or is it going to be the environment we were raised in? The nature versus nurture controversy is going to look at just that. Psychologists today all generally agree that both nature and nurture play a very significant role in development. The major debate centers around which factor contributes more to development. We also have continuity versus discontinuity. This question deals with whether or not development is going to be a gradual cumulative change from conception to death, or will it be a sequence of distinct stages? A lot of theories that we talk about in this video are going to focus on the discontinuity view. And our third and final view is going to be the idea of stability versus change. This is going to deal with the fact of whether or not personality traits that are present during birth last throughout the entire lifespan. These issues in development are generally researched using one of the four following methods. A longitudinal study is going to follow the same group of people over a long period of time. This could be several months to many years. Researchers are then going to evaluate changes in development in these individuals. Longitudinal studies provide us with a lot of information. However, they can be very costly, they take a very long time, and a lot of times participants will drop out and not make it to the end. A cross-sectional study is going to attempt to assess developmental changes by evaluating different age groups at different times. Cross-sectional studies are going to be cheaper than longitudinal studies. Participants are more reluctant to complete the study, and the results can be produced at a quicker rate. However, you do have the cohort effect, which states that differences in life experiences of the different age groups may result in experimental bias. Cohort sequential studies are going to take cross-sectional groups and assess them at least 2 times over the span of several months to many years. The cohort sequential study attempts to eliminate the bias brought in by the cohort effect. Our last method of study is going to be a retrospective study. This is basically just going to be interviewing an individual at the older range of their lifespan and collecting qualitative information. Researchers can then reconstruct changes that have occurred in the subject's life through these self-reports. This does provide us with a lot of information. However, and you guys should also know this since you should be experts on memory now, our memories are not perfect reconstruction of events, so this could lead to some bias in research. Plus, people can just lie to make themselves sound cooler. Like, I would maybe 50-50 lie about some aspect of my life on one of those things just to kind of like prop myself up a bit, make me feel a little better. What do I care? Physical development is going to focus on maturation and critical periods. A critical period is going to be a time interval during which specific stimuli have a major effect on development that the stimuli do not produce during other times. Prenatal development begins with conception and ends with birth. When an egg is fertilized, it becomes a zygote. A zygote contains all the genetic information necessary for a baby to develop in the womb. After the zygote multiplies over and over again, it eventually reaches the stage where it becomes an embryo. After 8 weeks, the embryo has a head, partially formed eyes, limbs, even a skeleton made up of cartilage. All organs are present in some rudimentary form, and the developing baby starts to actually resemble a human. It's at this stage that we refer to the baby as a fetus, something that we all have in common. We were all born as babies. At birth, we are equipped with the necessary reflexes reflexes that increase our likelihood of survival. Rooting is going to be the baby's response to turning its cheek towards an object when it is touched. The baby is trying to put the stimulus in its mouth. Sucking is going to be the automatic response of drawing anything into the mouth. Both sucking and rooting allow for the baby to be nourished. Physical development during the first 2 years of human life is very, very complex. During the first 2 years of life, over 20 billion brain cells are produced. We're going to see body proportions change as the torso and limbs grow more quickly, so we're no longer going to have those bobblehead looking babies. These bodily changes are going to allow the baby to start its journey of walking. In adolescence, we see another growth spurt occur, paired with a dramatic increase in the production of sex hormones, also known as puberty. In 1950, Erik Erikson will publish his book, Childhood and Society, which features his well-known 8 stages of psychosocial development. As a neo-Freudian, Erik Erikson is going to have a lot of similar beliefs as Freud did, but he's going to look more at how social factors affect development. Erikson's theory of psychosocial development is going to center around the idea of crisis resolution. At each one of Erikson's 8 stages, you are met with a crisis. If this crisis is properly resolved, you will benefit from the positive aspects of that stage. However, if we don't meet the needs of this stage, leads us to lack the positive traits of the stage. Our first stage of psychosocial development is going to occur during infancy, and it is going to be the trust versus mistrust stage. If the infant has a positive resolution at this stage, it produces a sense of predictability and trust in the infant's environment. However, feelings of physical and psychological neglect can lead to a feeling of mistrust in the environment. It is in this stage that attachment between the baby and the parents occur. In the mid-20th century, psychologist Harry Harlow researched the idea of attachment using baby monkeys. In his research, Harlow theorized that the baby monkeys would become more attached to caregivers that provide them with nourishment over comfort. Harlow tested this experiment by exposing the baby monkey to an aversive stimulus. Harlow then observed if the monkey would go to a wire mother, which provide nourishment, or a cloth mother, which provide comfort. The cloth mother and the wire mother were the exact same design. However, the wire mother had a bottle with food in it, while the cloth mother had a soft cheesecloth wrapped around the wires, a similar cheesecloth that the monkeys used to sleep on. Harlow's hypothesis was ultimately proven incorrect. When the monkey was exposed to an aversive stimuli, it would go directly to the cloth mother where it felt comforted. In his research, Harlow also found that if close emotional connections and bonds are not made at an early age, it can hinder the organism's ability to form these bonds later on. In toddlerhood, we move to autonomy versus doubt. It is in this stage that caregivers encourage independence and self-sufficiency. This helps promote self-esteem in the toddler. If caregivers are overly restricting, it can lead to the toddler feeling a sense of self-doubt, which can result in low self-esteem. Our next stage is going to occur in early childhood. It is going to deal with initiative versus guilt. If a child is given a sense of freedom to initiate activities and develop a sense of social responsibility, the child will gain self-confidence. If parents over-control the child's activities and social learning, it can promote guilt and fear of punishment. And also, just a quick sidebar, just so you understand the difference between autonomy versus doubt and initiative versus guilt. Autonomy versus doubt is going to be more centered around the parents encouraging the child to act independently, while initiative versus guilt is going to focus on the child taking the steps to act independently. Autonomy would be a parent encouraging a child to pick out their own outfit, while initiative would be a child picking out their own outfit on their own. A common theme in our first 3 stages of psychosocial development center around the fact that our parents play a huge role in the early years of our social development. Parenting styles in general can have a huge impact on how children develop. The authoritarian parenting style is when the child has very little freedoms and parents have very high expectations of them, and the child is generally punished harshly if these expectations are not met. Permissive parenting, on the other hand, is going to be when limits are not set. Parents in this category either try too hard to be their child's friend, or they're just overall neglectful. Children of permissive parents generally grow up to have poor interpersonal skills and self-control issues. The authoritative parenting style is a parenting style defined by reasonable demands met with very high responsiveness to the needs of the child. These parents give their child the resources they need to be successful. Psychologists generally agree that the authoritative style of parenting leads to the most psychologically healthy children. Alright, so back to Erikson. As we get into middle and late childhood, our social interactions occur outside of our home with our peers. This is when we reach the industry versus inferiority stage. Positive experiences with our parents and keeping up with our peers allow us to develop a sense of pride and competence in our schoolwork and social activities. However, if we have negative experiences with our parents and fail to keep up with our peers, this can lead to having a feeling of inferiority or inadequacy. Moving on to adolescence with identity versus role confusion. Taking on different roles, the adolescent starts to develop a sense of self and forms commitments to future adult roles. Apathetic adolescents, or ones who do not experience any type of pressure or demands from others, may feel confusion about their identity or role in society. As we move into young adulthood, we face the challenge of intimacy versus isolation. When we establish lasting and meaningful relationship with others, it allows us to develop a sense of connectedness and intimacy, which is very important for our social development. On the other hand, if we have a fear of rejection or are too preoccupied with ourselves, it can cause us to be unable to form close, meaningful relationships, leading to a sense of psychological isolation. Next, we have generativity versus stagnation, which occurs during middle adulthood. Through child rearing, productive work, and caring for others, the adult expresses unselfish concern for the welfare of the next generation. If the adult is too self-indulged or self-absorbed, or if they're too preoccupied with their own needs, it can lead to a sense of stagnation or boredom with life. Erikson's theory is going to end with ego integrity versus despair. This occurs during late adulthood, and it basically involves the older adult looking back at their life, and if they believe their life was filled with a bunch of meaningful, positive experiences, they will have a sense of self-acceptance and meaningfulness and be proud of their accomplishments. On the other hand, if they do not feel fulfilled with their life's experiences, they might have a sense of regret and despair about their accomplishments. You may have noticed how each psychosocial stage I paired with a life stage. These are just going to be general guidelines for an individual who has a full and healthy life. It is possible that you may go through and skip around different stages based on your life circumstances. For example, a 36-year-old who finds out they are terminally ill might start to experience the ego integrity versus despair stage. Psychologist Eliza Kubler-Ross studied death and dying and focused her attention on the end of life. Kubler-Ross concluded that patients who were near death experienced 5 stages of coping: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, then acceptance. More recent research has shown that not all terminally ill patients or patients near death necessarily go through all of these stages or go through them in the order that I provided. Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget is going to develop a stage theory of cognitive development based off of years of careful observation and testing on children. Piaget believed that all knowledge begins with building blocks or schemas, which are just mental representations that our brain organizes into categories. Through the process of assimilation, we are able to fit new information into our existing schemas. And accommodation is going to allow us to modify our existing schemas to fit in new information. Piaget's theory starts us out in the sensory motor stage, which lasts from birth to around the age of 2. During this stage, the child will gain an understanding of object permanence. Object permanence is just going to be the idea that an object still exists even though you can no longer see, feel, or hear it. So if I have a ball and put it behind my back, if a baby were in front of me, if they develop object permanence, they understand that the ball is just behind my back. If they've yet to develop object permanence, they might think that I'm a magician and the ball just disappeared. It is at this stage that babies also start to understand basic cause and effect relationships. As our cognition develops with age, we move into our pre-operational stage, which lasts from age 2 to 7. It is at this stage that symbolic thought emerges and language development starts to occur. However, our thought process does tend to be rather egocentric, which basically means that we think we're the center of the world. Piaget also found that in this stage, children could not solve conservation problems. Years 7 to 11 bring us to the concrete operation stage. We can now solve conservation problems, and we have also developed logical thought and can apply this logical thought to concrete problems. It's at this stage that the child starts to understand the idea of reversibility. In our final stage of Piaget's theory of cognitive development, we have the formal operation stage, which starts in our adolescence and lasts last all the way until adulthood. In this stage, we can now logically solve all type of problems, as well as think in scientific and abstract terms. One of the few criticisms of Piaget's theory is that it did not emphasize changes in cognitions as adults get older. Gerontologist Warren Shea, a gerontologist, if you were wondering, is someone who studies the process of aging, and honestly, I don't even know if I'm saying that word right. Anyways, Shea's studies found that fluid intelligence, which is things that are going to require speed or rapid learning, is going to diminish as we age. However, crystallized intelligence, which is going to be our learned knowledge and skills, is going to strengthen as we age. So things like vocabulary are generally going to improve as we get older. In situations that access their skills and long-term memories, older adults have shown superior functioning to younger individuals. A decline in mental abilities can be slowed down by staying healthy, living in a favorable environment, and engaging in stimulating activities. Here we have Heinz. His wife was dying from a particular type of cancer. Doctors told Heinz that a new drug discovered by a local chemist might be able to save his wife. The only problem was the chemist was charging an absurd rate for the drug, and Heinz just simply could not afford it. Heinz went everywhere he could to look for money. He went to friends, he went to family, but still, he could only raise enough money to pay for half of the drug. Heinz pleads with the chemist, telling him that he can pay half now and half later, but the chemist still refused, saying that he discovered the drug so he can do whatever he wants with it. Heinz was so desperate for the drug that later that night he broke into the chemist's lab and ended up stealing it. Do you think that Heinz should have stolen the drug? Would it change anything if Heinz didn't love his wife? What if the person dying was a stranger? Would it make a difference? Should the police arrest the chemist for murder if the woman died? This same scenario and those same questions were presented to a group of 72 young men from Chicago, ranging from the ages of 10 to 16. Now, before I get into anything, I would like to address something that you may be thinking as well. Yes, only using a small sample from one demographic will lead to some pretty harsh criticisms for this theory. As a cognitive psychologist, Lawrence Kohlberg is going to see how our morals develop as we age. Moral development is going to refer to our growth in the ability to tell right from wrong, control our impulses, and act ethically. Like Piaget and Erikson, Lawrence Kohlberg is going to be a stage theorist. Kohlberg's theory is going to be differentiated in 3 distinct levels, each including 2 stages. Level 1, or the pre-conventional level of morality, states that morals are going to be dictated by the standards of adults and the consequences that follow after a rule is broken. In this level of thinking, we are very egocentric. We base all of our decisions on what will happen to us directly as a result. Heinz might decide, hey, I can definitely steal that drug and get away with it, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm not going to get in trouble. What's the loss? Heinz sees nothing wrong with stealing another person's property in this scenario, which exhibits pre-conventional moral behavior. Level 2, or conventional morality, is where most adolescents and adults reside. In this stage of moral development, we follow rules to live up to the expectations of others in order to maintain law and order and keep a civil society. In this stage of moral development, Heinz might not steal the drug because he doesn't want to break the law, or maybe he will steal the drug because he wants to be a good husband. Our third and final stage of moral development is going to be the post-conventional stage of morality. This level of morality states that moral reasoning is going to be based on individual rights and justice. In this stage, we become aware of rules or laws that exist for the greater good of the people. We even see that some laws go against our universal moral principles, so we break them. As we mentioned before, a major criticism of Kohlberg's theory is going to be the sample he used. Similar demographics, similar age, same gender. Carol Gilligan, a cognitive psychologist and former student of Kohlberg, is going to take the basis of Kohlberg's theory and apply it directly to women. Gilligan believed that women followed a different set of moral guidelines. And that is it for our Unit 6 review on lifespan development. I hope you enjoyed it. guys, be sure to turn that FRQ into Google Classrooms by Friday. As always, if you have any questions, please email me and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I got nothing, so I guess I'm just going to walk away. Bye.